I thought the sound of twisting metal was the worst thing I would survive that rainy Tuesday, but I was wrong. The real impact hit 3 weeks later. When my mother looked at the mounting bills and decided to leave, she thought she could walk away from the wreckage, but she forgot one crucial detail my grandfather was watching. And he was about to make the only move that mattered. The rain that night had not been heavy, just a slick, persistent grease on the asphalt that turned the highway lights into long, blurring streaks. I remembered checking the clock on the dashboard, seeing that it was 7:15, and thinking about the leftover Thai food waiting in my refrigerator. That was the last coherent thought I owned for 3 days. The rest was a violent collage of sensory fragments: the screech of tires that sounded like a woman screaming, the implosion of safety glass, and a crushing pressure against my hips that felt less like an impact and more like the earth itself had decided to close a fist around me. When I finally surfaced from the chemically induced dark, the silence was the loudest thing in the room. I was 33 years old, a senior consultant for a firm that specialized in logistics, a woman who paid her taxes early and ran half marathons in October, but lying in that hospital bed, staring at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, I was simply a collection of broken parts. My pelvis was fractured in 2 places. That was the headline. The subtext was a severe concussion that made the room tilt whenever I moved my eyes too quickly, and a constellation of bruising that turned my left side a deep, sickly purple. I tried to shift, and a gasp tore out of my throat. Kennedy. The voice was sharp, manicured, and familiar. My mother, Marlene Stewart, was sitting in the vinyl chair next to the bed. She was wearing a beige cashmere cardigan that I knew cost more than my first car, and her hair was perfectly blown out, stiff with hairspray. She did not look like a woman who had been holding a vigil. She looked like she was waiting for a meeting to start. "I am here," she said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "You are awake. Thank God. I have been terrified." She reached out and patted my hand. She did not hold it. She patted it, the way one might pat a dog they were afraid might bite. "Water," I croaked. She poured a cup from the plastic pitcher, her movements efficient, as I drank, letting the cool liquid soothe the raw scrape of my throat. She began to talk. She did not ask how much pain I was in. She did not ask if I remembered the crash. "The insurance adjusters have been calling non-stop," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It is a nightmare. Kennedy, absolute chaos. I told them you were incapacitated. But you know how these people are, and the hospital administration vultures. They were asking for your copay information while you were still in surgery. Can you imagine?" I closed my eyes. The pain in my hips was a throbbing, red-hot drumbeat. "Mom," I whispered, "my legs. They are fine," she said dismissively. "Well, broken, but fine. The doctor said it is a stable fracture. You just need time. But Kennedy, we need to talk about the deductible. I checked your policy, and it looks like you have that high-deductible plan we argued about last Christmas. I told you that was a mistake." I felt a tear leak from the corner of my eye, sliding hot into my hairline. I was alive by a margin of inches, and she was lecturing me on actuarial tables. Marlene. The new voice was gravel and oak. My grandfather, Walter Stewart, stood in the doorway. He was 78 years old, a man who had spent 40 years running a hardware supply chain before retiring to a life of woodworking and reading history books. He leaned on his cane, not because he needed it desperately, but because he liked the authority it gave him. He was wearing his Sunday suit. Though it was a Wednesday, "Walter," Marlene said, her voice tightening. "I was just catching her up. You were stressing her out," Walter said. He walked into the room, moving with a slow, deliberate cadence. He bypassed Marlene completely and came to the other side of my bed. He did not pat my hand. He wrapped his large, calloused fingers around mine and squeezed gently. "Hello, kid," he said softly. "Hi, Grandpa. You gave us a scare," he said. His eyes, usually a bright, mischievous blue, were rimmed with red. I could see the fatigue etched into the lines around his mouth. "How is the pain bad?" I admitted. "I will get the nurse," he said. He did not look at the machines. He looked at me. He saw the person, not the problem. Marlene sighed. A sharp exhalation through her nose. Walter, do not coddle her. She needs to know the reality of the situation. This is going to be expensive. Money is paper. Marlene, Walter said without turning his head. This is your daughter. I watched them. The two pillars of my remaining family. My father had left when I was 6. A ghost I barely remembered. It had always been the three of us, Marlene. The anxious striver who viewed life as a series of transactions where she was always being shortchanged. And Walter, the stoic foundation who absorbed her neuroticism like a shock absorber. Marlene sat back down, picking up a glossy magazine and flipping the pages aggressively. I am just saying, she muttered, someone has to be the realist. Over the next week, the hospital room became a theater, and Marlene was the star. When the doctors came in, she was the grieving, attentive mother. She fluffed my pillows unnecessarily. She asked intelligent, probing questions about orthopedic outcomes and physical therapy timelines. She nodded sympathetically. When the neurologist explained that my concussion might cause lingering cognitive fog and emotional volatility. She is a fighter, Marlene told the head nurse, beaming with pride. My Kennedy never gives up, but the moment the white coats left the room, the mask slipped. She would pace the small linoleum floor, tapping furiously on her phone. She complained about the cafeteria coffee. She complained about the lack of cell service in the ICU wing. She complained that the parking validation only covered 2 hours. I felt like an inconvenience. I was a disruption to her schedule, a smudge on her perfectly curated life. She never said it explicitly. She never said, I wish you hadn't crashed. Instead, she said things like, I had to cancel my appointment with the stylist. Or, do you have any idea how much gas I am using driving back and forth? Walter was different. He showed up every morning at 7 o'clock, before the doctors made their rounds. He brought a notebook. He wrote down everything the medical team said, asking them to spell out the names of medications and side effects. He brought me a silk sleep mask because he noticed the hallway lights bothered me. He brought me lip balm because the hospital air was dry. On the 5th day, the first real blow to my life outside the hospital landed. My phone rang. It was the HR director at my firm. I expected a generic get-well wish, maybe a discussion about short-term disability. Kennedy, she said, her voice bright and overly cheerful. We are all so devastated to hear about the accident. We sent flowers. Did you get the lilies I did? Thank you, I said, my voice thick with medication. Listen, Kennedy, she continued, the brightness faltering just a fraction. This is terrible timing. Truly terrible. But as you know, the firm has been looking at a restructuring plan for the last quarter. My stomach turned over. I knew what was coming. We have decided to dissolve the logistics division. She said, it is effective immediately, now, because of your tenure and the situation. We are offering a very generous severance package. We are framing it as a voluntary separation so you can focus on your recovery without the pressure of a return date. I stared at the phone. I had given that company 7 years. I had missed weddings. I had worked through holidays. You are firing me, I asked, while I am in a hospital bed. No. No. Absolutely not. She stammered. It is a restructuring. It affects everyone. It just coincides with your leave. Honestly, Kennedy, take the severance. It is 6 months of pay. It is the best thing for you right now. I hung up. I did not have the energy to argue. I did not have the energy to scream that this was illegal, or at least morally bankrupt. I just felt a heavy, gray exhaustion settle over me. I was 33, broken, and now unemployed. When I told Marlene, she did not get angry at the firm. Well, she said, chewing on her thumbnail, 6 months is decent, but you need to be careful. That money will go fast with these medical bills. You cannot treat it like a windfall. Kennedy, we need to budget. She said, as if she were paying the bills, as if she were the one who had lost her career. 10 days after the crash, I was discharged. The plan, dictated by Marlene, was that I would come to her house. My apartment was a third-floor walk-up. Impossible for someone with a fractured pelvis. Marlene's house was a sprawling ranch-style place in the suburbs, with a guest room on the ground floor. The transition home was a humiliation I will never forget. The ambulance ride was bumpy, every pothole sending a shockwave through my hips. When we arrived, the EMTs had to carry me inside on a stretcher. Marlene stood in the doorway, directing them like she was overseeing a furniture delivery. "Mind the jam," she shouted. "Do not scratch the hardwood." They settled me into the guest bed. It was a room Marlene usually used for storage. There were boxes of Christmas decorations stacked in the corner and a sewing machine on the dresser. It did not feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a warehouse. Daily life became a maze of indignities. I needed a walker to move 3 feet to the bathroom. I needed help putting on socks. My brain felt like it was stuffed with cotton wool. I would start sentences and forget the end of them. I would cry over commercials for dog food. Marlene was there, but she was not present. She made me soup, but she served it lukewarm. She helped me to the bathroom, but she sighed loudly every time I rang the little bell she had left on the nightstand. One afternoon, about a week after I moved in, I woke up from a nap. The house was quiet. Save for the hum of the refrigerator, I needed water, and my walker was just within reach. I maneuvered myself out of bed, gritting my teeth against the spike of pain in my hip. I made it to the hallway. The door to the kitchen was cracked open. I could hear Marlene on the phone. Her voice was low, frantic. "It is not a good time," she hissed. "No, listen to me. She is here. She is in the house. I cannot just leave. Yes, I know what the deadline is. I know, but the accident threw everything off." I froze, leaning heavily on the walker. Who was she talking to? "You said the timing would be flexible," Marlene whispered, her voice cracking. "This is not flexible. If I do not have the signature by the 1st, what happens?" "No, you cannot do that." She paused, listening. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling. "I will figure it out. Just do not call the house line again." I shuffled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Timing, signature, deadline. It sounded like she was in trouble. Financial trouble. Marlene was always vague about money. She lived well the car, the clothes, the house, but I never really knew where the money came from. My father had left a small policy, and Walter helped her. I knew, but her panic sounded existential. I managed to get back into bed before she came down the hall. When she peeked in, I feigned sleep. She lingered in the doorway for a long time, just watching me. I could feel her gaze. It did not feel maternal. It felt calculating. 2 days later, a social worker from the hospital came for a home visit. Her name was Mrs. Halloway, a kind woman with tired eyes and a sensible cardigan. She sat by my bed, checking my mobility and asking about my pain levels. Marlene hovered in the doorway, arms crossed. "There is one small administrative hiccup," Mrs. Halloway said, pulling a file from her bag. "We are having trouble processing the claim for the extensive physical therapy. The insurance company says there is a rider document missing from your file. It is the form that authorizes long-term rehabilitation coverage." Marlene stepped forward quickly. "That is ridiculous. I sent everything over." Mrs. Halloway adjusted her glasses. "I'm sure you did, Mrs. Stewart, but the insurance company claims the document they have on file is outdated. It looks like the policy was modified about 4 months ago." I frowned. "Modified? I didn't touch my policy." Marlene laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Kennedy, you know how you are with paperwork. You probably signed an update and forgot. You were so busy with that logistics project." I stared at her. I was meticulous with my paperwork. It was literally my job. I did not forget policy updates. "I will handle it," Marlene said, reaching for the file in Mrs. Halloway's hand. "I will call the broker tomorrow. It is just a clerical error." Mrs. Halloway held onto the file for a second longer than necessary, her eyes flicking between Marlene and me. Finally, she let go. "Please do," she said. "Without that rider, The out-of-pocket costs for the rehab facility will be significant. After Mrs. Halloway left, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Marlene was vibrating with nervous energy. She started talking about rehab options, but not the one my doctor had recommended, the one with the hydrotherapy pool and the neurological specialists. "There is a place in Oakhaven," she said, scrolling through her iPad. "It is very affordable, and they have availability immediately." Oakhaven. I asked, "Mom, that is a nursing home. It is not a rehab center. It is a skilled nursing facility," she corrected. "It is perfectly adequate. And considering the insurance issue, we have to be realistic about costs." "I am 33, I said, my voice rising. "I am not going to a nursing home. I need actual therapy so I can walk again." "You are being selfish," she snapped. "You have no idea the pressure I'm under." That evening, Walter came for dinner. He brought a pot roast and a bag of books. He sensed the tension immediately. He sat in the armchair next to my bed, his cane resting against his knee. "What is going on?" he asked. "Marlene wants to send me to Oakhaven," I said. Walter's eyebrows drew together. "The nursing home." "No, absolutely not. It is what we can afford," Marlene argued from the hallway. "Unless you want to pay $20,000 a month for the fancy place." "Dad, I will if I have to," Walter said calmly. "But she is not going there. In fact, I have a better idea. Kennedy, why don't you move into the guest suite at my place?" Marlene froze. "Dad, you cannot take care of her. You are 78. I have a ground floor suite with a walk-in shower." Walter said, "I have already called a home health agency. I can hire a nurse for the mornings and evenings. I am alone in that big house. It needs company." Marlene's face went through a complex series of spasms. Relief. Surely she would be free of the burden. But there was something else. Fear. If I was with Walter, she couldn't control the narrative. She couldn't control the mail. She couldn't control me. "She needs professional care," Marlene insisted. "She needs peace," Walter said, "and she is not getting it here." He looked at me. "It is up to you." Kennedy, I looked at the boxes of Christmas decorations. I looked at Marlene's tight, angry face. "I want to go to Grandpa's," I said. Marlene threw her hands up. "Fine, if that is what you want, but do not come crying to me when it gets too hard." That night, the house was uneasy. I could hear Marlene packing things in the kitchen, not dishes, papers. The sound of shuffling, of zippers, of drawers opening and closing. I needed to use the bathroom. I rang the bell, but Marlene didn't come. I rang it again. Nothing. Gritting my teeth, I grabbed the walker. I made the slow, agonizing journey to the bathroom on my own. On my way back, I passed the dining room table. Marlene's purse, a large designer tote, was sitting on one of the chairs. It had tipped over, spilling its contents onto the seat. There was a lipstick, a wallet, a set of keys, and a folder. It was a thick blue legal folder. The label on the front was typed in crisp black letters, Ashford Bay Family Trust Office. I stopped. I knew that name. Ashford Bay was a wealthy enclave 2 towns over. We did not have a family trust. We were comfortable. Sure, but we weren't trust fund people. Walter had savings, but he kept it in a local credit union. Marlene was always complaining about cash flow. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and flipped the folder open. The documents inside were dense, legal jargon, powers of attorney, beneficiary designation forms. I saw my name, I saw Walter's name, and I saw dates, recent dates, Kennedy. I flinched, snapping the folder shut and shoving it back into the bag. Marlene was standing at the end of the hallway. She was wearing her bathrobe, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked older, more tired than I had ever seen her. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was flat. "I needed the bathroom." I stammered. "I rang the bell. I didn't hear it." She said. She walked toward me. She didn't look at the bag. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, glassy. She looked like she was about to say something important, something real. She reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was cold. "You know I love you, right?" she said. "Mom, everything I do for this family. to keep us afloat. You have to understand that. The world is hard. Kennedy, it eats people like us if we are not smart. She sounded terrified. Mom, what is going on? I asked. She pulled her hand away. Go to bed. Kennedy, you need your rest. The next morning, I woke up to a silence so profound it felt heavy. The sun was streaming through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Mom, I called out. No answer. I checked my phone. There was a text message from her. It had been sent at 3:15 in the morning. I can't do this. I need space. Please don't call. That was it. No explanation. No plan for my breakfast or my medication. Just a digital severing of ties. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the words. She was gone. Just like that. The front door opened. I heard the tap, tap, tap of a cane. Walter walked into the room. He was wearing his coat, and he had a thermos of coffee in one hand and a paper bag from a bakery in the other. He looked at me, and then he looked around the empty room. He saw the silence. She is gone, isn't she? He asked. It wasn't really a question. I held up my phone, my hand shaking. She sent a text. Walter set the coffee down on the nightstand. He sat in the chair Marlene had occupied the day before. He did not look shocked. He looked grim. His jaw was set hard, the muscles bunching beneath the skin. She always did run when the bill came due. He murmured. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, handing it to me before I even realized I was crying. All right, Walter said, his voice steady as a heartbeat. Get your things. Kennedy, we are leaving. You are safe now. He stood up. Looking at the door where Marlene had stood the night before, his eyes were cold, harder than I had ever seen them. She thinks she can just walk away. He said to the empty house, She is making a mistake. He turned back to me, and the hardness vanished, replaced by a gentle warmth. Let's go home. Kid, we have work to do. The transition to my grandfather's house was not just a change of address. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. Marlene's house had vibrated with a frantic, performative energy, like a stage set where the actors were constantly forgetting their lines. Walter's house was built of silence and cedar. It smelled of old paper, sawdust, and the lemon oil he used to polish the banisters. For the first time since the headlights blinded me on the highway, I felt the ground stop shaking. Walter did not hover. He did not perform care. He structured it. 2 days after I arrived, a woman named Mrs. Gable knocked on the door of the guest suite. She was 60, with forearms like braided rope and a demeanor that brooked no nonsense but offered infinite patience. She was not a nurse. She was a certified home health aide Walter had hired out of his own pocket, bypassing the insurance bureaucracy entirely. Good morning, Kennedy, she said, setting a canvas bag on the chair. Walter tells me we are working on mobility and dignity today. I do not do pity, and I do not do baby talk. If you need a break, you say break. If you hurt, you say hurt. We are a team. There was no sighing when I needed help to the bathroom. There was no checking of a watch when she helped me shower, a process that humiliated me to my core. She kept a steady stream of conversation going about her garden, effectively building a wall of normalcy around my naked vulnerability. She asked for permission before every touch. May I lift your left leg now, she would ask. Yes, I would whisper. She treated my body not as a broken object to be managed, but as a sovereign territory that was temporarily under repair. It was a kindness so sharp it made my chest ache. But as the external chaos settled, the internal storm began to rot me from the inside out. The adrenaline of the crash and the immediate crisis of Marlene's abandonment had acted as a kind of anesthetic. Now, with the quiet of Walter's house surrounding me, the reality of my life crashed down. I was 33. I was wearing adult diapers at night because I could not get to the toilet fast enough. My career, the identity I had spent a decade building brick by brick, was gone, replaced by a severance check that felt like hush money. and my mother had left me. The grief came in waves. First, it was a heavy, wet sadness that made it impossible to lift my head from the pillow. I would cry until my throat was raw, mourning not just the relationship, but the illusion of it. I had always known Marlene was flighty, self-absorbed, and anxious, but I had believed, with the stubborn naivety of a child, that there was a floor to her selfishness. I thought that if things got bad enough, she would stay. She hadn't. Then came the rage. It was a hot, white spike that made my hands shake. How dare she? How dare she leave me when I couldn't even walk? I fantasized about screaming at her, about throwing her designer bags into the street, about forcing her to look at the bruises that mapped my body, and then, inevitably, came the guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt of being a burden. Maybe I was too much. Maybe my pain was too loud. My needs too expensive. Marlene had always said I was intense, that I took up a lot of space. Had I driven her away? Was her abandonment a reaction to my failure to heal fast enough? The worst part, however, was the fear that I was losing my mind. The doctors had called it post-concussive syndrome. They used words like deficits and latency. To me, it felt like my brain was a radio tuned slightly off station. I would be talking to Walter over dinner, and suddenly the words would slip away, dissolving into static. I would look at a fork and forget what it was called for a terrifying 3 seconds. One afternoon, I tried to read a novel. I got through the first paragraph, and by the time I reached the third sentence, I had forgotten the first. I tried again, and again. I threw the book across the room, watching it flutter to the floor like a dead bird, and then I sobbed into my hands. If I couldn't think, if I couldn't hold data in my head, who was I? My job was logistics. My life was logic. Without that, I was just a broken body in a guest room. Walter found me like that, shivering on the bed. He did not tell me it would be okay. He did not offer platitudes. He simply picked up the book, placed it on the nightstand, and sat in the chair. "It takes time. Kennedy," he said, "the brain is not a computer. It is a garden. You cannot yell at a plant to grow faster." "I am scared." "Grandpa," I whispered, "I feel stupid." "You are not stupid," he said firmly. "You are injured. There is a difference, and we have time." While I fought my internal war, Marlene became a digital ghost. She would not answer calls. If I dialed her number, it went straight to voicemail, but she sent texts. They arrived at odd hours, erratic bursts of communication that felt disjointed. "I hope you are finding peace in the quiet." One said, "Healing is a personal journey." Another read, "Please respect my need for boundaries right now. I am processing my own trauma." I showed the phone to Walter one evening. He put on his reading glasses, the wire frames perching on the end of his nose, and squinted at the screen. "Trauma," he grunted. "Her trauma is a declining credit limit." "It doesn't sound like her," I said. "Marlene uses exclamation points. She uses emojis. She spells things wrong when she is emotional. This sounds scrubbed." "It sounds like a lawyer wrote it," Walter said darkly, "or a brochure." He handed the phone back to me. "Do not reply. Kennedy, it feeds the beast." Walter had secrets of his own, though he tried to hide them. He began leaving the house for hours at a time, dressed in his Sunday suit, carrying a leather briefcase I had not seen since he retired. "I have errands," he would say vaguely, "library business." But the library did not require a 3-piece suit, and it certainly didn't require him to come home looking gray and pinched. His lips pressed into a thin line. I knew he was shielding me, absorbing some new blow, so I wouldn't have to feel the impact. But the secrecy scratched at my nerves. I was already feeling powerless. Being kept in the dark made it worse. The mail, however, was harder to hide. Walter tried to intercept it. But one Tuesday, the postman arrived while Walter was in the shower. Mrs. Gable brought the stack to me. Most of it was junk, but there was a thin envelope from the hospital billing department. I tore it open, expecting another statement for the MRI or the ambulance. It was a notice of claim adjustment. I scanned the document, my eyes struggling to focus on the small print. It listed a charge for an orthopedic consultation, $600, but under the column for insurer responsibility, it said 0. I frowned. That couldn't be right. I had hit my deductible. I looked closer. In the notes section, there was a line of text that made no sense. Claim denied. Service date conflict. Charges rerouted to third-party administrator CMS Holdings per beneficiary instruction. I read it 3 times. Per beneficiary instruction. That meant me. But I hadn't instructed anyone to reroute anything, and who was CMS Holdings? I had never heard of them. It looked like the bill had been bounced out of the normal insurance pathway and sent into a black hole. I kept the paper, tucking it under my mattress like contraband. A few days later, my friend Sarah called. Sarah was one of the few people from my pre-accident life who hadn't faded away. She was loud, messy, and fiercely loyal. "I am coming to get you," she announced. "We are having a backyard thing, just hot dogs and beer. Very low stakes. You need to see the sun. Kennedy, you are turning into a mushroom. I can't." "Sarah," I said, "the walker, the noise, my head. Walter can drive you." She bulldozed. "I will set up a lounge chair in the shade. You sit, you eat a potato chip, you go home. 2 hours. Please," Walter encouraged it. "Go." He said, "You need to remember that the world exists." So I went. The effort of getting dressed exhausted me. Putting on jeans over my brace was a tactical nightmare. By the time Walter dropped me off at Sarah's suburban bungalow, I was sweating and trembling. But Sarah was true to her word. She settled me into a plush outdoor chair under a large oak tree, put a sparkling water in my hand, and chased away anyone who looked like they wanted to ask about my prognosis. It was almost nice. The air smelled of charcoal and cut grass. I watched people laugh and move with an ease that felt alien to me. After an hour, Sarah's husband, Mark, came over. Mark was a good guy. A claims adjuster for a large auto insurance firm. He looked tired, nursing a beer. "Hey, Kennedy," he said, sitting on the grass near my chair. "Good to see you out. How are you holding up?" "I am surviving," I said. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. I didn't want to bring shop talk into the party, but something has been bugging me. Sarah told me about the runaround you are getting with the paperwork. It is a mess, I admitted. "Yeah, well, I was curious. So I looked up the accident report in the central database." He said, "Just unofficial. Wanted to see if I could offer any advice." I stiffened. "And it is weirdly clean." "Kennedy," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "Usually, with a multi-car pileup like that, the file is a mess of conflicting statements and pending investigations. But yours, it was closed out in 48 hours. Liability assigned. Case shut." "Is that bad?" I asked. "It is efficient," he said. "But here's the thing. The report references a vehicle maintenance log. It says the brakes on your car were inspected 3 weeks prior to the crash, and the records were uploaded to the file." I stared at him. "Mark, I haven't had my car serviced in 6 months. I was meaning to take it in for an oil change, but I never got around to it." Mark frowned. "That is what I thought. You are not exactly a car person, but the file says the records were provided by the owner immediately following the incident. To show that the mechanical failure wasn't due to negligence." "Mechanical failure?" I asked, my voice rising. "The police told me it was hydroplaning. They said I lost traction on the wet road." Mark looked uncomfortable. "The report cites a caliper seize. Kennedy, it says your brakes locked. But because the maintenance records were there, they ruled it an accidental equipment failure rather than negligence. It saved you a ticket, probably, but if you didn't provide those records, who did?" A chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze swept over me. "I need to see that report." I said, "I will email it to you." Mark said, "But Kennedy, be careful. If those records are fake, that is fraud. Insurance companies do not like fraud." The drive home was silent. Walter glanced at me in the rearview mirror, noticing my pale face. But he didn't press. When we got back to the house, I went straight to my room and opened my laptop. Mark's email was waiting. I opened the PDF. It was a standard police report, dry and bureaucratic. I scrolled down to the section labeled Evidence and Exhibits. Exhibit C, Maintenance Log, Vehicle ID number 4992, provided by representative of owner. I clicked the attachment. It was a scanned invoice from a mechanic shop called Lube Tune, dated 3 weeks before the crash. It listed a full brake inspection and fluid flush. I looked at the address of the shop. It was in Oak Haven, 3 towns over. I had never been there in my life. I zoomed in on the signature at the bottom of the invoice. It was a scrawl, barely legible, but the date next to it was written in a very specific way, the European style. Day before month, with a slash. My mother wrote her dates like that. She had picked up the affectation during a study abroad trip in college and never dropped it. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Marlene had submitted false maintenance records for my car. Why to save me a ticket? That didn't make sense. Marlene didn't care about traffic violations. She cared about money. If the accident was ruled a mechanical failure, did that change the insurance payout? Did it shift liability? And then I remembered the folder in her bag. Ashford Bay Family Trust Office. And the text, "I can't do this." I grabbed my walker and made my way to the kitchen. Walter was sitting at the table, peeling an orange. He looked up as I entered, his eyes scanning my face. "Grandpa," I said, "we need to talk." He set the orange down. "Okay." I told him everything. The billing notice with the weird rerouting, the conversation with Mark, the fake maintenance records with Marlene's handwriting style. Walter listened without moving. He did not look surprised. He looked resigned. When I finished, he sighed, a long, rattling sound that seemed to empty his lungs. "She is desperate," he said quietly. "Grandpa, this isn't just desperation. This is forgery. I don't even know what this is. Why would she lie about my brakes? Because," Walter said, looking at his hands, "if the accident is your fault, the insurance payout is limited. If it is a mechanical failure that you tried to prevent, the payout structure changes, especially if there are other policies involved." "Other policies?" I asked. "What other policies?" Walter rubbed his face. "Kennedy, there are things about this family's finances you do not know, things Marlene has kept hidden, and things I have allowed." He looked up, and his eyes were full of a painful, naked regret. 5 years ago, after your grandmother died, Marlene got into some trouble, an investment that went bad. She was going to lose the house. She came to me, crying, begging. She said she just needed a bridge. "What did you do?" I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. "I co-signed a document," he said. "It was supposed to be a limited surety bond. It gave her access to the family trust's capital as collateral for a loan. It was supposed to expire in 12 months, and I never checked to see if she closed it." He admitted, "I trusted her, or I didn't want to fight her. It is the same thing, I suppose." He looked at me, and I saw the shame burning in him. He was the protector, the rock, and he had handed the keys to the castle to the one person who would burn it down for warmth. "I think she never closed it," Walter said. "I think she expanded it, and I think when you got hurt, she saw a way to clear the board." "Clear the board," I whispered. "Using my accident." Walter nodded slowly. If she could control the narrative of the crash, if she could control the insurance flow. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I felt a wave of nausea. Marlene hadn't just abandoned me. She was using my broken body as an ATM. She was rewriting the history of my near-death experience to cover her bad bets. "I need to call her." I said, "She won't answer." Walter said. I dialed anyway. I sat at the kitchen table, listening to the ring, once, twice, 3 times. "Hello." The voice was breathless, startled. "Mom," I said. "Kennedy," Marlene said, her voice dropping. "I told you, I cannot talk right now. I am in a meeting." "You are not in a meeting." I said, my voice shaking. "I know about the brake records. Mom, I know you forged them." Silence, absolute, terrified silence. Then, in the background, a sound cut through the static. It was a metallic, echoing chime. A woman's voice, amplified and distorted. Paging passenger Dylan to the white courtesy phone. Passenger Dylan. It was the sound of an airport terminal. You are at the airport. I said, Kennedy, please. Marlene whispered, it is not what you think. I am trying to fix it. I just need to get to the... She stopped. Where are you going? I demanded. Marlene. Where are you going? I have to go. She said, I am sorry. I am so sorry. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. She is running. I said to Walter, she is getting on a plane. Walter's face hardened. The regret vanished, replaced by the cold, iron look of a man who was done being passive. She thinks she can outrun this, he said softly. He stood up and walked to the wall phone, the old-fashioned landline he kept for emergencies. He dialed a number from memory. Greta, he said into the receiver. It is Walter. Yes. I need you to look at something right now. He listened for a moment, his eyes fixed on the dark window. Check the trust disbursement log for the last 48 hours, he said, specifically, any transfers to an entity called CMS Holdings. He waited. I watched the clock on the stove tick. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then, Walter's expression changed. It didn't soften. It turned into stone. I see, he said. And the beneficiary on the transfer. He listened again. Thank you. Greta, no. Do not file it yet. I will be there in 20 minutes. He hung up the phone. He turned to me. He looked 10 years younger, energized by a righteous, terrifying anger. What did she say? I asked. Walter walked over to the table and placed his hands flat on the wood. There has been unusual activity, he said. Marlene initiated a transfer yesterday, a significant one. She is trying to move the trust liquidity offshore. She thinks she has the authority because of that paper I signed 5 years ago. Is it gone? I asked. Is the money gone? Not yet, Walter said. It is pending clearance. It takes 3 days for an international wire of that size to clear. He picked up his cane. I am going to Greta's office, he said. Grandpa? What are you going to do? I asked. Walter looked at me. He looked at the brace on my leg. He looked at the dark circles under my eyes. He looked at the granddaughter he had raised when her father left, the woman he was now saving from her mother. I am going to make one move, he said. It will change everything. He put on his hat, opened the door, and walked out into the night. The silence that followed Walter's departure was not empty. It was heavy, filled with the static of waiting. I sat in the kitchen for 2 hours, watching the hands of the clock sweep past the numbers, measuring the time it took to dismantle a family. I knew what Walter was doing. He was not shouting. He was not making threats. He was walking into a law office and signing a piece of paper that would turn off the oxygen supply to my mother's chaotic life. When he finally returned, the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the floorboards. He hung his hat on the hook and leaned his cane against the wall. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning, but his eyes were clear. It is done, he said, sitting heavily at the table. What did you do? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. I filed an emergency petition for a temporary trusteeship, he said, his voice flat and administrative. We froze the accounts, all of them, the main trust, the auxiliary savings, and the access lines attached to the property. Marlene can look at the money, but she cannot touch a single cent of it without my countersignature or a court order. I felt a wave of nausea. This was the nuclear option. She will be furious. I said, she will be stopped. Walter corrected. It is a protective measure. Kennedy. We are not suing her. Yet. We are simply hitting the pause button until we can figure out where the money has been going. I nodded. But the relief I expected did not come. Instead, I felt a deep, oily shame. Families were supposed to be messy, yes, but this was not messy. This was forensic. We were treating my mother like a rogue employee who had been caught embezzling from the company safe. And the worst part was, I knew it was necessary. I was the reason everything was collapsing. If I hadn't crashed, if I hadn't been broken, Marlene could have kept juggling her glass balls. "You need to rest," Walter said. Seeing my face, "Tomorrow. The noise starts." He was right. The noise started at 9 o'clock the next morning. I was in the middle of a sponge bath with Mrs. Gable when my phone buzzed. Then the house phone rang. Then Walter's cell phone chimed. It was a cacophony of electronic demands. Walter answered the landline in the hallway. I could hear his side of the conversation through the thin walls. "No, Marlene, no, I am not going to reverse it. You need to come home. No, not to your house. To Greta's office. We will talk there." He hung up and appeared in the doorway of the guest suite. "Get dressed," he said. "She is in town. She went straight from the airport to the bank, found out her cards were declined, and now she's on her way to Greta Lorne's office. We are meeting her there. I cannot go out. I panicked. I look like a wreck. I can barely walk." "You are going," Walter said firmly. "You are not a child. Kennedy, you are the plaintiff, whether you filed the paperwork or not. You need to hear what she has to say." The drive to the law office was a blur of pain and anxiety. Every bump in the road sent a shockwave through my pelvis, but the physical pain was a distraction from the dread pooling in my stomach. Greta Lorne's office was in a brick building downtown, the kind of place with mahogany wainscoting and leather chairs that smelled of old money and quiet intimidation. When we entered the conference room, Marlene was already there. She was pacing the length of the oriental rug, wearing a trench coat belted tightly at the waist. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were manic. When she saw us, she stopped dead. "This is insane," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at Walter. "You have humiliated me. Do you know the teller at the bank cut up my debit card? In front of people? Dad. In front of people I know." "Sit down." "Marlene," Walter said, lowering himself into a chair at the head of the table. "I will not sit down," she shouted. "You froze everything. I cannot even buy gas. I had to take a cab here, and I had to pay with cash from my emergency stash. You are treating me like a criminal because I went on a trip, because I needed a break." Greta Lorne, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, sat at the side of the table. She had a thick file folder open in front of her. "Marlene," Greta said, her voice calm and dangerously low, "please take a seat. We have a lot to get through, and histrionics will not change the ledger." Marlene glared at her, then at me. "And you," she spat. "I am scrubbing your floors, emptying your bedpans, sacrificing my entire life to nurse you back to health, and this is how you repay me, by letting him lock me out of my own inheritance. I didn't ask him to do it." I said, my voice shaking. "But you left. Mom, you vanished." "I was overwhelmed," Marlene cried, finally throwing herself into a chair. "Do you have any idea the pressure I have been under? The doctors, the insurance, the house, the bills? I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I needed space to breathe so I could come back and be a better mother. This is punishment. That is all this is. You are punishing me for being human." Greta cleared her throat. She tapped a finger on the spreadsheet in front of her. "Marlene, this is not about your vacation," Greta said. "This is about the trust. We have done a preliminary audit of the last 18 months. Marlene stiffened. She crossed her arms, looking away. "There are missing statements," Greta continued, "but more importantly, there is a pattern. Every time a quarterly distribution hit the account, 80% of it was withdrawn within 48 hours. Cash withdrawals, wire transfers to accounts that do not have your name on them. And then, there are the loans." "Loans?" Walter asked. Greta nodded. "Short-term, high-interest loans taken out against the trust's projected income. They were paid back, mostly, but the fees are astronomical. It looks like you were churning money." Marlene. "Moving it from one hole to fill another," Marlene scoffed. "I am managing investments. You have to spend money to make money. I was leveraging our position." "You were gambling," Walter said. "I was trying to save us," Marlene shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "The market turned on me. I just needed time to correct it." Greta turned a page in the file. Her expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The investments are a civil matter between you and the trust, Greta said, but there is something else. Something that directly concerns Kennedy. I looked up. What Greta slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. It was a policy change confirmation from my auto insurance provider. Kennedy, Greta said gently, did you authorize a change to your policy limits on August 15th? I frowned. August. That was 2 months before the crash. No, I haven't touched my policy in years. Greta looked at Marlene. On August 15th, Greta said, a request was submitted to reduce the liability and medical coverage on Kennedy's vehicle to the state minimum. The comprehensive collision coverage was dropped entirely. The personal injury protection was slashed from $100,000 to $5,000. I stared at the paper. The numbers swam before my eyes. $5,000. My hospital bill was already over $80,000. Why, I whispered. Marlene refused to look at me. She was picking at a loose thread on her coat button. It was temporary, she mumbled. Temporary, I repeated. Mom, you gutted my insurance. Why? Because the premium was due, she snapped, her eyes flashing with defensive tears. I was short that month. I had a liquidity issue with one of the bridge loans. I needed to free up $600 quickly. I logged in, lowered the coverage, and paid the minimum. I was going to switch it back in November when the trust distribution cleared. I felt the blood drain from my face. You bet my life on $600, I asked. I didn't think you were going to drive into a wall, Marlene cried. It was a risk assessment. You never drive. You take the train to work. The car sits in the driveway 90% of the time. It was a logical place to cut costs for a few weeks. How was I supposed to know? Her logic was terrifyingly human. It wasn't malice. She hadn't wanted me to get hurt. She had just needed the money. And she had convinced herself that nothing bad would happen in the narrow window of her gamble. She had traded my safety for her solvency, assuming the universe would cooperate, but the universe hadn't cooperated. And when the crash happened, I said, realizing the full horror of it, that is why you were panicking about the bills. That is why you wanted me in the cheap nursing home, because there was no money coming from the insurance company. You knew. You knew the whole time I was lying in that bed, terrified of bankruptcy, that you had done this. Marlene wiped her eyes furiously. I was trying to protect you from the stress. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I was talking to a specialist who said maybe we could retroactively adjust the claim if we framed it right. That is why I needed the brake records. To make it look like a mechanical failure so the manufacturer would be liable, not the insurance. My stomach turned over. The fraud, the fake brake invoice, it was all a frantic attempt to cover the hole she had dug. Walter stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor was violent. That is enough, he said. Dad, please. Marlene sobbed. I can fix this. Just unfreeze the accounts. I have a deal pending that will cover everything. You are done. Marlene, Walter said. His voice was shaking. Not with age, but with a rage so profound it vibrated in the air. You stripped your daughter of her protection to pay a gambling debt. You left her in a hospital bed while you tried to hustle a payout. You are not a mother. You are a hazard. He looked at Greta. Keep the freeze, he said, and start the paperwork to remove her as a trustee permanently. I want full custody of the assets. He walked over to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and squeezed. We are leaving, he said, as we walked out. Marlene screamed after us. You cannot do this. It is my money too. You are stealing my life. Her voice echoed in the hallway, desperate and small. The ride home was silent. I stared out the window, watching the suburban landscape roll by. I felt hollowed out. The betrayal wasn't that she had stolen money. It was that she had looked at my safety and decided it was a tradable commodity. When we got back to the house, Walter made tea. We sat in the living room, the steam rising from the mugs. I have to tell you something, Walter said after a long time. I looked at him. What else is there? Your grandmother, he said. Eleanor. He took a sip of tea, his hand trembling slightly. Before she died. She made me promise something. She never trusted Marlene with money. She loved her. But she saw something in her, a hunger, a lack of Brakes. He looked at me, his eyes wet. Eleanor wanted to put the entire estate in a bypass trust for you. She wanted to skip Marlene entirely. She said, Walter, if you give that girl the checkbook, she will eat her young. I shivered. I argued with her. Walter admitted. I said Marlene just needed confidence. I said we couldn't cut our own daughter out. So we compromised. We set up the trust with Marlene as a trustee, but with clauses, protective clauses. If she ever showed signs of instability, I was supposed to invoke them immediately. He set the mug down. I saw the signs years ago. Kennedy. I saw the loans. I saw the frantic juggling. But I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to humiliate her. I thought if I just helped her out of the jams, she would stabilize. He reached across the table and took my hand. I failed you, he said. I ignored Eleanor's warning until it was too late. This is my fault as much as hers. No, Grandpa, I said, gripping his hand. You are the one who stopped it. You are the one who saved me. I only stopped it because you nearly died, he said bitterly. That is a high price for a lesson. The next few weeks were a grueling slog of physical reality. The drama with Marlene was a storm overhead, but on the ground, my battle was with gravity and friction. My physical therapist, a young man named David with boundless optimism and forearms like tree trunks, came to the house 3 times a week. Okay, Kennedy, he would say, today we are doing standing transfers. No walker. Just you and your quads. The pain was a living thing. It lived in the deep architecture of my pelvis, a sharp, grinding agony that flared every time I put weight on my left leg. But the physical pain was manageable. It was the fear that paralyzed me. Every time I stood up, my brain flashed back to the impact, the crushing metal, the helplessness. I would start to shake, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I can't, I would say, clutching the parallel bars Walter had installed in the hallway. I can't hold it. You can. David would urge, trust your bones. They are knitting. One Tuesday, about 3 weeks after the confrontation at Greta's office, I hit a wall. I was tired. My head was throbbing with the low-grade migraine that had become my constant companion. David asked me to do a set of squats. I went down, and my leg buckled. I didn't fall. David caught me, but the sensation of weakness, of my own body betraying me, broke something inside. I screamed. It was a guttural, ugly sound. I pushed David away and collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. I am never going to be normal, I wailed. I am broken. Look at me. I am 33 and I cannot even stand up. David sat back on his heels, giving me space. Walter, who had been watching from the kitchen, started to come forward, but David held up a hand. It sucks, David said. I looked up, snot running down my face. What, it sucks, he repeated. You are right to be pissed off. You were an athlete. Right. A runner. And now you are learning to walk like a toddler. It is humiliating. It is unfair. He handed me a towel. But here's the truth. Kennedy, you are not broken. You are injured. Broken is a permanent state. Injured is a process. You can stay on the floor and be right about how unfair it is. Or you can get up and be in pain for 10 more minutes so that next week you are in less pain. I wiped my face. I hate you, I muttered. I know. He smiled. Everyone hates the PT. Now, give me your hand. I took his hand. I stood up. I did the squats. I cried through every single one of them. But I did them. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was a tow truck driver. I have a drop-off for Kennedy Stewart, he said, holding a clipboard. One Mazda, released from the impound lot. My car. Walter went out to sign for it. I watched from the window as the mangled wreck of my vehicle was lowered onto the driveway. The front end was an accordion of crushed metal. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks. Seeing it brought a fresh wave of nausea, a visceral memory of the smell of airbag dust and gasoline. Leave it there, Walter told the driver. I have someone coming to look at it. Who? I asked when he came back inside. A friend of a friend. Walter said, Your friend Mark recommended him, a mechanic who specializes in post-accident analysis. if Marlene was willing to forge maintenance records. I want to know what she was trying to hide. The mechanic arrived an hour later. His name was Sam, a guy with grease under his fingernails and a skeptical squint. He didn't say much. He just walked around the car, taking pictures. He jacked up the rear end, crawled underneath, and stayed there for a long time. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching him. When he finally crawled out, he wasn't wiping his hands on a rag. He was holding his phone, looking at a photo he had just taken. He walked up the porch steps, his expression grim. "You said the police report blamed a caliper seize," Sam asked. "That is what I was told." I said. Sam shook his head. He held out his phone. "Look at this," he said. I leaned in. The image was a close-up of a metal tube, coated in road grime, but there was a section of it that was bright, shiny silver. "That is the brake line," Sam said. "The report says it burst due to age and corrosion, but look at the fitting. That is a brand new compression nut. And the line itself. It is not copper nickel, which is standard for this model. It is cheap steel." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means someone replaced this line recently," Sam said, "within the last month. But they did a hack job. They used the wrong flare type for the fitting. It held pressure for a while, maybe a few weeks of light driving, but the first time you really stomped on the pedal." He made a popping sound with his mouth. "It blew out," he said. "Instant pressure loss. No brakes." I stared at the photo, but the invoice, I whispered. "My mother had an invoice for a brake inspection." Sam snorted. "Inspection. Maybe. But no professional shop installed this line. This looks like driveway work. Someone tried to patch it up cheap, or what Walter asked from the doorway, or someone set it up to fail." Sam said quietly, "It is hard to prove intent, but this wasn't an accident of nature. This was human error. Gross human error." I felt the world tilt. Marlene had said she forged the invoice to cover up a lack of maintenance. She said she wanted to make it look like a mechanical failure. But if the brake line had been tampered with, if someone had actually touched the car, my mother's disappearance took on a new, terrifying shape. She hadn't just run away from debt. She hadn't just run away from the shame of the insurance fraud. She had run away from the car. I looked at Walter. His face was ashen. He was putting the pieces together, just like I was. She knew. I whispered. She knew the car wasn't safe. Walter gripped his cane until his knuckles turned white. "We need those photos." "Sam," Walter said, "send them to me, and send them to my lawyer." I looked back at the wrecked car in the driveway. It wasn't just a symbol of my bad luck anymore. It was a crime scene. And the person who had the most to lose from the truth coming out was the woman who had birthed me. The accident wasn't random. And my survival wasn't just a recovery story. It was a liability. The days following the discovery of the brake line were a study in controlled fury. The house, once a sanctuary of silence and cedar, transformed into a war room. The dining room table, previously reserved for Sunday roasts and Walter's morning coffee, was now covered in stacks of paper, legal pads, and the glossy, high-resolution photographs Sam the mechanic had taken of my car's undercarriage. We were fighting a war on two fronts. Walter and I, he was the general, coordinating with Greta Lorne to besiege the fortress of the family trust, looking for the cracks Marlene had slipped through. I was the scout, navigating the muddy, bureaucratic terrain of the accident itself, trying to prove that the crash hadn't been an act of God, but an act of man. My first battleground was the police station. Going back there felt like walking into a cage, the last time I had spoken to officers. I was high on painkillers in a hospital bed, nodding vaguely as they told me about hydroplaning and wet roads. This time, I walked in with a walker, my grandfather flanking me like a bodyguard, carrying a folder that contained the evidence of my mother's deceit. We met with Detective Miller, a man with a tired face and a desk buried under mountains of paperwork. He didn't dismiss us, which was a small mercy, but he didn't jump to arrest anyone either. He looked at the photos Sam had taken. He looked at the invoice from the fake mechanic shop. He rubbed his chin. the sound of his stubble rasping against his skin filling the small interrogation room. "It is compelling." "Ms. Stewart," Miller said, sliding the photo of the shiny compression nut back across the desk. "But here's the problem. Your car sat in a general impound lot for 3 weeks. That lot is fenced, sure, but it is not Fort Knox. Without a clear chain of custody, a defense attorney, if it ever got that far, would argue that anyone could have tampered with the vehicle after the crash. But the invoice," I argued, my voice tight. "The invoice is dated before the crash. My mother submitted it to the insurance company. That proves she knew about the work, or the lack of it." "That proves fraud," Miller conceded. "Insurance fraud. That is a crime, absolutely. But proving that she, or anyone else, intentionally sabotaged the brake line to cause harm, that is a much higher bar. We need to prove intent. We need to prove she knew the repair was dangerous." He leaned forward, his expression softening. "I am not saying we won't look into it. The inconsistency is serious. I will open a supplemental file. We will interview the owner of this lube tune place. If they confirm they never saw your car, we have leverage. But do not expect a squad car at her door tonight. These things are slow." Slow. The word hung in the air like smoke. I didn't have slow. My mother was moving money, moving herself, moving the very ground beneath us, while Walter and Greta dug into the financial bedrock. I sought a different kind of expert. Mark, my friend's husband, had given me a number. "Call Elena," he had said. "She used to be an investigative journalist. Now she helps people who are getting crushed by the system. She knows how the paper trail works." I met Elena in a coffee shop on the edge of town. She was a small woman with sharp, bird-like features and eyes that seemed to be constantly scanning the perimeter for threats. She didn't offer sympathy about my injuries. She asked to see the file. I pushed the stack of documents toward her. The police report, the insurance denial, the weird billing statement from the hospital. Elena read in silence for 20 minutes. She drank 2 espressos black. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. "You are being erased," she said. What I asked. "This isn't just about saving money." "Kennedy," she said, tapping the billing statement. "This is administrative violence. Look at this coding. They moved your claim from a standard liability track to a high-risk pool managed by this third-party administrator, CMS Holdings. That usually happens when an insurer suspects the policyholder is at fault or fraudulent. But I wasn't at fault." I said, "Exactly," Elena said. "Someone told the system you were. Someone flagged your file. By doing that, they justified the delay in payments. They created a fog of war. And while you were busy trying to figure out why your physical therapy was denied, they were doing something else in the background." She pointed to the date on the policy change. "See this? The coverage reduction. It happened on a Friday afternoon, and this fake mechanic invoice submitted the Monday after the crash. It is a pincer move. Squeeze the coverage, then control the liability narrative. Whoever is advising your mother knows exactly how the algorithm works." Advising her, I asked, "You think she has help?" Elena laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Amateur grifters make mistakes. They forget to sign things. They leave paper trails. This is professional. This smells like a firm that specializes in asset protection for people who are about to hit a wall. They strip the assets, hide the liability, and leave the victim you holding the bag." I felt a chill go through me. Walter had mentioned Marlene was desperate, but desperation usually led to sloppiness. This was surgical. That afternoon, Marlene finally surfaced. She didn't come to the house. She didn't call Walter. She sent an email to me. Subject: a way forward, Kennedy. "I know you are angry. I know Walter is angry. But this legal war is going to destroy us all. The lawyers will take everything. There will be nothing left for your care or for my retirement. I am willing to come back. I am willing to help you manage the recovery. I have contacts at a specialized neurological center in Switzerland. We could go there, but I cannot do anything while my hands are tied. If Walter lifts the freeze, if he drops this insanity about the trusteeship, I will fix everything. I promise. This is a one-time offer. Please, be reasonable." I read the email 3 times. A month ago, I might have read it as a peace offering. I might have heard the desperation in her voice and felt a pang of daughterly guilt. Now, all I saw was the transaction. She wasn't offering love. She was offering a service care management in exchange for access to the bank accounts. She was negotiating a hostage release, and I was the hostage. I showed the email to Walter. He read it standing by the window, the afternoon light highlighting the deep grooves in his face. Switzerland. He scoffed. She watches too many movies. She wants a deal. Grandpa? I said, she wants amnesty. Walter corrected. She wants us to pretend the last 6 weeks didn't happen. He sat down opposite me, placing his cane across his knees. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Do you know why she is like this? He asked. I shook my head. She has always been anxious, about money, about status. It wasn't always anxiety, Walter said. It was ambition. He leaned back, looking into the past. 20 years ago, right after your father left. Marlene started a business. It was an interior design firm. She had talent. Kennedy. She really did. She had an eye for color, for flow. She landed a few big clients in the city. She was so proud. She bought a new car. She started looking at private schools for you. I remember that. I said, I remember she used to bring home fabric swatches. Walter nodded. But she got overextended. She took on a massive renovation project for a developer who turned out to be a crook. He stiffed her. He refused to pay the final invoice, which was nearly $200,000. Marlene had already spent the money on materials and subcontractors. She was on the hook for all of it. He sighed. It broke her. Kennedy, not just financially, it broke her spirit. She was sued by the vendors. She had to declare bankruptcy. It was public. It was humiliating. All her friends, the country club crowd she was trying so hard to impress, they all saw it. He looked at me, his expression full of sorrow. After that, she made a vow. She told me, Dad, I will never be powerless again. I will never let anyone hold a debt over me. She decided that the only way to be safe was to be the one holding the strings. She stopped caring about the work. She started caring about the leverage. I stared at him. It made sense. The obsession with appearances, the panic over bills, the frantic need to control the narrative. She wasn't just greedy. She was traumatized by failure. She was trying to build a fortress of money so high that no one could ever serve her a summons again. And I was just a brick in the wall, I whispered. Walter reached out and covered my hand with his. You are not a brick, he said fiercely. You are the reason I'm still fighting, and we are going to find out who is helping her build this wall. The answer came 2 days later, from Greta Lorne. She arrived at the house with a thick file tucked under her arm. She declined tea. She spread documents out on the coffee table. I found the leak, she said. She pointed to a series of emails she had subpoenaed from the trust office server. Marlene has been communicating with a firm called Caldwell Meridian Strategies. Greta said, they bill themselves as a wealth advisory group. Their website is full of pictures of sailboats and compasses. They promise holistic asset protection. And Walter asked, and they are sharks. Greta said flatly, I made some calls. They target people in distress, widows, divorcees, business owners facing litigation. They come in and offer to structure their assets to make them judgment-proof. They set up shell companies, offshore trusts, complicated insurance schemes. She tapped a printed email. Look at this. This is dated 3 months ago. Marlene wrote to them asking about liquidity options. Their response. They suggested she review all existing insurance policies to minimize outflow and maximize liquid reserves. Minimize outflow, I said, realizing what it meant. That means cutting coverage. Greta nodded. And it gets worse. After the accident, Marlene emailed them in a panic. She told them there was a potential liability event involving a family member. Their advice, control the data, limit the paper trail, secure representative status immediately. Secure representative status, I repeated. What does that mean? It means getting power of attorney, Greta said, or at least a temporary guardianship. If she is your legal representative, she controls your medical records. She controls the insurance communication. She can stop you from seeing things, but she doesn't have power of attorney. I said, I never signed anything. Greta looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. Kennedy, are you sure? I am positive. I said, I was in a coma for 3 days. When I woke up, I was on morphine. I couldn't even hold a pen. Greta pulled a sheet of paper from the bottom of the stack. This was filed with the hospital administration on the 2nd day of your stay. She said, it is a designation of personal representative form. It authorizes Marlene Stewart to act on your behalf for all medical and billing decisions. I stared at the document. At the bottom, there was a signature. It was shaky, jagged, barely legible. But it was my name. I didn't sign this. I whispered, I don't remember this. It is a digital signature, Greta said, captured on a tablet. The memory hit me like a physical blow, a flash of light, a beeping monitor, a nurse, no, not a nurse, a woman in a gray suit standing over my bed. She was holding a glowing rectangle. Just touch here, honey, she had said, just to authorize the pain meds. I felt sick. She tricked me. I said, my voice rising. I was high. I had a concussion. Someone came into my room and told me I was signing for medication. We need to verify this, Walter said, his voice cold. We went to the hospital the next day. It was a pilgrimage of anger. We bypassed the reception desk and went straight to the risk management office. The administrator, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, tried to stonewall us. Patient privacy protocols are very strict, he said, sweating slightly. My privacy was violated the moment you let someone shove a tablet in my face while I was brain damaged, I snapped. I want to know who presented that form. Henderson clicked away on his computer. He looked at the screen, then at me. According to the log, the form was uploaded at 2:14 in the afternoon on the Tuesday after admission. The device ID belongs to a guest user. A guest user, Greta asked sharply, not a hospital employee. Henderson swallowed. We sometimes allow family members to use the patient portal tablets to assist with onboarding. It appears, yes, the log shows a request from a Marlene Stewart to expedite the authorization process so she could speak with the billing department, and who witnessed the signature Walter asked. Henderson looked at the screen again. There is no witness signature recorded. It was a self-verification. You let a woman walk into an ICU, hand a tablet to a patient with a traumatic brain injury, and accepted a signature without a witness, Greta asked. Her voice was quiet, but it sounded like a guillotine blade dropping. That is a violation of about 12 different statutes. Mr. Henderson. I sat back in the chair, feeling the room spin. It wasn't just that she had forged the break records. She had come to my bedside, watched me struggle to breathe, and tricked me into signing away my autonomy so she could hide her financial mess. She had looked at her broken daughter and saw a loophole. The drive home was quiet. Walter didn't say a word until we pulled into the driveway. He turned off the engine and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. I have an idea, he said. What I asked, I want to restructure the trust. He said, not just to remove her. I want to add you. Me, I asked. Grandpa, I don't know anything about trusts. You know logistics, Walter said. You know how to track things. You know how to spot a discrepancy in a supply chain. That is all this is. Kennedy, money is just inventory. He turned to look at me. I don't want to protect you anymore. Kennedy, I do. I will always protect you. But protection makes you passive. It makes you a victim. I want to give you the weapon. I want you to be a co-trustee. I want you to have the legal authority to audit the books, to approve the transfers, to veto Marlene. I felt a surge of fear. Me against Marlene. I can't. I said, she is my mother. She stopped being your mother when she tricked you into signing that tablet. Walter said harshly, now she is just the opposition. And you need to be the one to hold the line, not me, you. I looked at my hands. They were still shaking, a lingering tremor from the accident. But beneath the shake, there was strength. I had survived the crash. I was surviving the rehab. Okay, I said, teach me. The next morning, the letter arrived. It came by courier. A thick, heavy envelope from a law firm in the city, not Greta's firm, a different one. Vance, Harrow Associates. Walter opened it at the kitchen table. He read the cover letter, his face turning a deep, dangerous red. "What is it?" I asked. Walter slammed the paper down. "She is escalating," he said. He handed me the letter. "Dear Mr. Stewart, we represent Marlene Stewart. We are in receipt of your petition to freeze the trust assets and remove our client as trustee. We view this as a hostile and baseless action. Be advised that if the petition is not withdrawn within 48 hours, our client intends to file a counter-petition for guardianship of Kennedy Stewart. We are prepared to present evidence that Kennedy Stewart is suffering from severe cognitive decline and emotional instability following her accident, rendering her incompetent to manage her own affairs or provide credible testimony regarding family matters. We have affidavits prepared to detail her erratic behavior, her history of anxiety, and her dependency on narcotics during her recovery. Furthermore, should this matter proceed to a public hearing, our client will be forced to disclose sensitive medical and psychological records to the court to prove her daughter's incapacity. We urge you to settle this matter privately by reinstating Ms. Stewart's authority." I dropped the letter. It felt like it was burning my fingers. "She is going to say I am crazy," I whispered. "She is going to paint me as an addict." "She is bluffing," Walter said. "Is she?" I asked. "She has the medical records. Grandpa. She has the signature allowing her to access them. She knows I'm on pain meds. She knows I've been crying every day. She can twist that. She can make me look like I've lost my mind. She is trying to scare you into silence," Walter said. "She knows if we go to court, the fraud with the insurance comes out. She is betting you are too afraid of being exposed to fight her." I looked at the letter, incompetent, unstable. If I fought her, my medical history would become public record. My vulnerability would be dissected in a courtroom. Everyone, my old boss, my friends, the world would see me as the broken, brain-damaged woman she was describing. But if I hid, if I let her win, she would take everything. She would finish what the accident started. I looked at Walter. He was waiting for my answer. He had offered me the weapon. Now I had to decide if I was brave enough to pick it up. "What do we do?" Walter asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the kitchen tasted like stale coffee and fear. "We don't withdraw," I said. "Are you sure?" Walter asked. "It will get ugly. Let it get ugly," I said, my voice hardening into something new, something cold and sharp. "She wants to talk about my instability." "Fine. Let's talk about hers. Let's talk about the brake line. Let's talk about the tablet." I pushed the letter back across the table. "Tell Greta to file the restructure," I said, "and tell her to add the fraud allegations to the petition. If Marlene wants a public fight, let's give her one." Walter smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a grim, wolfish baring of teeth. "That is my girl," he said. He picked up the phone to call Greta. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the window panes. A storm was coming, but inside the house, for the first time in weeks, the air felt clear. The ambiguity was gone. My mother had declared war on my sanity. I was going to declare war on her freedom. I decided to fight the way a glacier fights a mountain. I would not be loud. I would not scream in courtrooms or throw vases against the wall. I would move slowly, relentlessly, and with a crushing weight that would only be visible when it was too late to move. My mother's threat to paint me as incompetent was a strategic error on her part. She assumed that because I was broken, I was messy. She forgot that before I was her daughter, I was a logistics consultant. My entire professional life had been built on the premise that if you track every variable, you can control the outcome. So, I started tracking. I bought a fresh notebook, a thick black-bound ledger that sat on my nightstand next to my pain medication. I logged everything, every therapy session, every dose of oxycodone, down to the milligram and the minute, every flash of cognitive fog, every nightmare. I asked my therapist, doctor, Eris, for my session notes. "Are you sure?" she asked, her pen hovering over her pad. Reading your own trauma processing can be destabilizing. I need the data. I said, if my mother wants to claim I am unstable, I need proof that I'm doing the work. I need proof that my grief is a reaction to reality, not a symptom of madness. Doctor, Aris nodded slowly. She printed the files. They showed a woman who was angry. Yes. And grieving. Certainly. But whose cognitive faculties were sharp and whose judgment was sound. At the same time, I worked with Greta Lorne. We turned the guest suite into a satellite legal office. I spent my mornings doing leg lifts and balance exercises with Mrs. Gable, sweating through the pain, and my afternoons reviewing trust documents. I learned the language of betrayal. I learned that fiduciary duty was a legal term for don't steal from your family, and that material breach was a polite way of saying you broke the promise. 10 days after Sam the mechanic took the photos of my car, the official mechanical review came back. It arrived in a manila envelope, heavy with the weight of bad news. Walter and I sat at the kitchen table to read it. The report was technical, filled with jargon about tensile strength and hydraulic pressure, but the summary was clear enough to stop my heart. Finding the brake line failure on the rear left assembly was not consistent with normal wear and tear. The compression fitting used to secure the line was a 3/8-inch brass fitting, likely purchased at a general hardware store, forced onto a metric line. This mismatch caused microfractures in the flare. While the line held pressure initially, the vibration of normal driving would inevitably cause a catastrophic failure. I looked up at Walter. Someone fixed it with a hardware store part. I said, Walter's face was gray. Read the next paragraph. He said, Note, the installation mark suggests the work was performed with non-standard tools, likely pliers rather than a flare nut wrench, resulting in stripping of the nut. This is inconsistent with the service standards of the facility listed on the provided invoice. Lube tune. It wasn't just a bad repair, it was a lie. The invoice said a professional shop did the work. The car said an amateur with a pair of pliers did the work. Marlene didn't take the car to the shop. I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a stone. She did it herself, or she paid some backyard mechanic to do it for cash so she could pocket the difference. Walter closed his eyes. She knows nothing about cars, he said softly. She wouldn't know a brake line from a fuel line, but she knows people who do things cheap. She probably found someone, told them to patch it up so she could pass an inspection or sell it, and didn't care how it was done. And then she forged the invoice to make it look legitimate. I finished. To satisfy the insurance requirements, it was fraud. It was negligence, and it had nearly killed me. But it wasn't proof of intent to murder. That was the needle we were trying to thread. The police would look at this and see a cheap repair gone wrong, a tragedy of incompetence. They wouldn't see a mother trying to kill her daughter. They would see a mother who was too cheap to pay for safety. To me, the distinction didn't matter. The result was the same. While we processed the mechanical report, Greta's team struck gold on the financial front. They had been tracing the outflows from the trust, following the digital breadcrumbs Marlene had tried to scatter. It took time. Shell companies are designed to be opaque. But Greta was a bloodhound. She called us on a Thursday afternoon. I found the retainer, she said, her voice crackling over the speakerphone. What retainer? Walter asked. 2 weeks before Kennedy's accident, Greta said. Marlene wired $50,000 from the trust's operational account to a holding company in Delaware. That company is a subsidiary of Caldwell Meridian Strategies, the predatory wealth advisory firm. $50,000. I repeated. That is more than my annual salary used to be. It gets more interesting, Greta continued. The payment memo is coded as Crisis Management Retainer. Crisis Management. Walter asked, What crisis? The accident hadn't happened yet. Exactly, Greta said. She was anticipating a crisis, or she was being told a crisis was coming. I dug into the correspondence logs we subpoenaed. Marlene was receiving emails from a senior advisor at Caldwell named Julian Vane. Vane was telling her that her previous withdrawals from the trust, the ones she used to pay off her old debts, were about to be flagged by the annual audit. The audit, Walter whispered. Of course. The fiscal year ends in October. Vane told her she needed to immunize her exposure. Greta said. He sold her a package. He told her they could restructure her assets, hide the previous withdrawals, and create a protective liability shield. But to do that, she needed to minimize all other financial footprints. She needed to go dark. That is why she cut my insurance. I said, it wasn't just to save $600. It was to stop the insurance company from sending automated notices that might alert the trust auditors. She was trying to make herself invisible. She was cleaning the crime scene before the crime happened. Walter said. The pieces were locking together. Marlene wasn't a mastermind. She was a panicked animal caught in a trap of her own making. She had stolen from the trust, realized she was about to be caught, and hired a firm of sharks to help her hide the body. My accident was just collateral damage. I was a loose end that needed to be tied up so she could focus on saving her own skin. We have her, Walter said. We have the fraud. We have the theft. We have the timeline. I want to see her. I said. Walter looked at me. No, Kennedy. Let the lawyers handle it. I need to look her in the eye. Grandpa. I said. I need to know if she understands what she did. I need to hear her say it. We arranged the meeting at a neutral location. Not the house, not the law office, a hotel conference room near the airport. It was a sterile, beige space that smelled of lemon polish and stale air conditioning. Walter came with me, but I asked him to sit at the back of the room. I wanted to face her alone. Marlene arrived 10 minutes late. She was wearing a white suit, impeccable and sharp, but her face was gaunt. The makeup was applied a little too heavily around the eyes, trying to hide the dark circles. She carried a designer bag like a shield. When she saw me seated in my wheelchair, my leg extended in the brace, she faltered. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw genuine horror. But then she blinked, and the mask was back. Kennedy, she said, walking toward the table but stopping 3 feet away. You look better. The color is coming back to your cheeks. Sit down. Mother, I said. She winced at the word mother. I usually called her Mom. Mother was a title, an accusation. She sat. She put her hands on the table, clasping them together so tightly her knuckles were white. I assume this is about the counter-petition, she said, her voice tight. My lawyers told me I shouldn't be here, but I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to explain that I don't want to hurt you. Kennedy, I just want my life back. Your life. I said, yes. She said, I have worked for 30 years to keep this family afloat. I have made sacrifices you don't even know about. And now, because of one bad year, one difficult patch, Walter wants to take everything away. He wants to leave me destitute. You paid Caldwell Meridian Strategies $50,000 2 weeks before I almost died. I said, Marlene froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. We know about Julian Vane. I said, we know about the audit. We know you were trying to hide the money you stole from the trust. It wasn't stealing, she cried. It was borrowing. I was going to pay it back with what I asked, with the money you saved by cutting my brake line repair budget, with the money you saved by gutting my medical insurance. Marlene flinched as if I had slapped her. I didn't touch your car, she insisted. I needed to get it inspected. I asked a friend. He said he knew a guy who could do the brakes cheap. I didn't know he was going to use the wrong parts. I just needed the paperwork. Kennedy. She was crying now, ugly, gasping sobs, and the insurance, I asked. My voice steady, devoid of the pity she was trying to elicit. Vane said I had to lower my profile, she wept. He said the insurance company runs automated credit checks on high-value policies. He said if they ran one on me, they would see the loans I took out. They would alert the bank. The bank would alert the trust. It would all unravel. I just needed to lower the coverage for 2 months, just until the audit passed. I stared at her. You rolled the dice with my life. I said, I didn't think you would get hurt, she screamed. You are so careful. You never crash. It was just paper. Kennedy. It was just numbers on a screen. I was trying to save us from ruin. She believed it. That was the terrifying part. She truly believed that financial ruin was a fate worse than death, and therefore, Any risk was acceptable to avoid it. She hadn't wanted me to die. She just hadn't cared enough to ensure I lived. If it meant risking her solvency, it wasn't malice, I said quietly. It was math. You did the math, and I was the variable you could afford to lose. No, she sobbed, reaching across the table. Kennedy, no, I love you. You love control, I said, pulling my hand back. You love the image of yourself as the savior of this family, but you are not the savior. Mother, you are the liability. I looked at Walter. He stood up and walked forward. He placed a hand on my shoulder. A solid, warm weight. We are done here, Walter said. Marlene looked up at him, her face streaked with mascara. Dad, please, she whispered. Don't do this. Don't cut me off. I can't start over. I am 55 years old. I have nothing. You have your freedom, Walter said cold-heartedly, which is more than you deserve. If we took this to the police, really took it to them, you would be in prison for fraud. Be grateful we are keeping it civil. Civil, she laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. You are stealing my inheritance. It was never yours, Walter said. We left her there in the beige conference room, weeping over her lost leverage. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. I felt like I had just performed surgery on myself without anesthesia. Back at the house, Walter led me into his study. He went to the large oak safe in the corner, dialed the combination, and pulled out a yellowed envelope sealed with wax. He sat down opposite me and placed the envelope on the desk. You asked me once why I waited so long to act, he said. Why I let her get away with so much for so long. I nodded. Because I made a promise to your grandmother. He said, but I also made a promise to the contingency. He pushed the envelope toward me. Open it, he said. I broke the wax seal. The paper inside was old, the ink slightly faded. It was in my grandmother Eleanor's handwriting, looping, elegant and firm. My dearest Walter, if you are reading this, then my fears have come to pass. We both know Marlene has a hole in her heart that she tries to fill with things. We have tried to help her, to guide her, but some hungers cannot be fed. I am writing this instruction to be absolute. If Marlene's actions ever threaten the physical safety or future security of our grandchild, Kennedy, you are to invoke the nuclear clause. You are to strip her of all authority. You are to remove her from the trust completely. But you must not just remove her. You must replace her. Kennedy is strong. Walter, stronger than we were. If the worst happens, you must give the keys to her. Do not protect her by keeping her in the dark. Protect her by giving her the power to shine the light. Love, Eleanor. I put the letter down. My hands were shaking. She knew. I whispered. She knew this would happen. She hoped it wouldn't. Walter said, but she prepared for it. He took a deep breath. I am enacting the nuclear clause, Kennedy, but I am going a step further. I am not just removing Marlene. I am petitioning the court to restructure the trust entirely. He leaned forward. I am stepping down as primary trustee, he said. What I asked. Grandpa. No. You are the only one who knows how it works. I am 78 years old, he said, and I am tired. Kennedy, this fight, it has taken something out of me. I will remain as an advisor, but I want to appoint a professional corporate fiduciary to handle the day-to-day management. A bank, someone with insurance and oversight, and the beneficiary I asked. You, he said. You will be the primary beneficiary, and you will be the co-trustee with the bank. You will have veto power. You will approve the budget. You will decide if Marlene gets a stipend or if she starves. Me, I asked. I have to decide. Yes, Walter said, because it is your life she tried to mortgage. You should be the one to hold the deed. It was a terrifying amount of power. It was the power to punish, the power to forgive, the power to control. It was exactly what Marlene had wanted, and exactly what she had destroyed herself to get. I will do it, I said. The next week was a blur of legal motions. Greta filed the petition for the restructure. We submitted the evidence of the fraud, the payments to Caldwell Meridian, the mechanic's report, and the affidavit from the hospital about the digital signature. We expected Marlene to fight. We expected her lawyers to throw the incompetent accusations at us. But before they could, a new player entered the game. I received a letter at the house. It wasn't from Marlene's lawyer. It was from a firm in New York representing Caldwell Meridian Strategies. Dear Ms. Stewart, it has come to our attention that in the course of your private family dispute, you have made allegations regarding the business practices of our client, Caldwell Meridian Strategies. Specifically, you have implied in court filings that our client advised illegal activity. These allegations are defamatory and damaging to our client's sterling reputation. Be advised that if you do not immediately seal these records and retract your statements, we will be forced to pursue legal action against you for libel and tortious interference. Our client has vast resources and will defend its name vigorously. I showed the letter to Greta. She read it and smiled a tight, dangerous smile. They are scared, she said. They are threatening to sue me. I said, that doesn't look scared. That looks aggressive. It is a slap suit. Greta said, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They are trying to bully you into silence because they know what you found is radioactive. She tapped the letter on her desk. Julian Vane, the advisor Marlene was talking to. He isn't just a bad apple. He is part of a system. If this gets out that they are advising clients to commit insurance fraud to hide assets, they are done. The SEC would eat them alive. So what do? I asked. Do we seal the records, Kennedy? Greta said, looking at me over her glasses. You are the co-trustee now. It is your call. Do you want to hide, or do you want to double down? I thought about the brake line. I thought about the reduced insurance. I thought about the thousands of other people who might be sitting in wheelchairs right now because some advisor in a high-rise told their desperate relative to minimize exposure. Send it to the Attorney General. I said. Greta's smile widened. I already did. She said. 2 days later, the news broke. It wasn't on the front page, but it was in the business section. Regulatory inquiry opened into wealth firm Caldwell Meridian. The state attorney general's office has announced a probe into the practices of the boutique advisory firm following allegations of unethical asset shielding and insurance manipulation. Sources say the investigation was triggered by evidence submitted in a private trust dispute involving a prominent local family. My phone started ringing. Journalists, reporters, people who wanted to know the story behind the story. I didn't answer. I sat on the porch with Walter, watching the sun go down. You started a fire, Walter said quietly. I didn't start it. I said, I just opened a window so the world could see it burning. But as I sat there, I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Marlene was one thing. She was messy, emotional, and broke. Caldwell Meridian was different. They were rich, organized, and ruthless. And I had just put a target on my back that was visible from space. The family drama was over. The war had just begun. Walter coughed. A dry, rattling sound that lingered a little too long in the evening air. He rubbed his chest absently. Are you okay? I asked. Just tired. Kid, he said. Just tired. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the grayness in his skin, the tremor in his hands. He had held the line for me. He had used the last of his strength to push the boulder off my chest. I realized then that time was not on our side. I had won the power, but I was about to lose my protector. Recovery did not happen like it does in the movies. There was no montage set to uplifting music where I threw away my crutches and ran into the sunset. There was only the slow, grinding friction of bone knitting together and muscles relearning their jobs. 6 months after the accident, I was walking with a cane, but the limp was pronounced, a hitch in my stride that announced my history to anyone watching. My hip ached when it rained. My head still spun if I turned too quickly, but I was standing. The real test, however, was not the physical therapy gym. It was the driver's seat. I had hired a specialized instructor, a retired police officer named Sergeant Higgins, who taught defensive driving to trauma survivors. We met in empty parking lots on Tuesday mornings. Okay, Kennedy, he said, his voice calm and level. Put the car in drive. Foot on the brake. Feel the pressure. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The car was a sedan, similar to my old one, but with modifications: extra mirrors, blind spot sensors. I can't, I whispered. My right foot was trembling on the pedal. Every time I pressed down, my brain flashed images of the rain-slicked highway, the spinning lights, the crushing metal. You are not on the highway, Higgins said. You are in a parking lot behind a Target. The car is under your control. The brakes work. We checked them together. Remember, I took a breath. We had checked them. I had crawled under the car myself, with my cane lying on the asphalt, and inspected the lines. I knew exactly what a compression fitting looked like now. I knew the difference between steel and copper nickel. I eased my foot off the brake. The car rolled forward, 5 miles per hour, 10 miles per hour. Breathe. Higgins instructed. Scan your mirrors. You are the pilot. I drove for 20 minutes. It was exhausting, terrifying work. But when I put the car back in park and turned off the engine, I felt a surge of adrenaline that wasn't fear. It was power. I had moved a 2-ton machine with my own body, and I had survived it. I am done being a passenger, I said to the empty dashboard. 2 days later, the real reckoning arrived. Walter had called for a formal mediation. He refused to hold it at a law office. This is family business. He had said, we will finish it at the table where it started. The dining room table was cleared of its usual centerpiece. In its place were pitchers of water, legal pads, and a stack of files 3 inches thick. Greta Lorne sat at Walter's right hand. Opposite her was a man named Mr. Finch, a professional fiduciary from the bank, a neutral third party who would, if everything went to plan, become the financial guardian of the Stewart legacy. And then there was Marlene. She arrived with her lawyer, a sharp-featured man from Vance, Harrow Associates, who looked like he billed by the second. Marlene looked diminished. The white suit was gone, replaced by a dark navy dress that swallowed her frame. She looked older. The stress of the frozen accounts and the looming investigation had eaten away at her manic energy, leaving something brittle in its place. She did not look at me. She looked at the water pitcher. Let us begin, Walter said. He did not sound like my grandfather. He sounded like the CEO he used to be 40 years ago. His voice was stripped of affection, stripped of anger. It was just iron. We are here to finalize the restructuring of the Eleanor Stewart Family Trust, Walter continued, and to address the outstanding liabilities incurred by the former trustee, Marlene Stewart. Marlene's lawyer cleared his throat. My client contests the term liabilities. These were strategic investments that were interrupted by unforeseen circumstances. Greta opened a file. We have the audit results. Mr. Vance, we can call them investments if you like, but the tax code calls them unapproved withdrawals, and the email chain calls them panic. She slid a document across the polished wood. This was the final nail. The email trail Greta had uncovered between Marlene and Caldwell Meridian Strategies. I watched Marlene read it. I saw her eyes flick back and forth, tracking her own words from months ago. From M. Stewart to J. Vane Caldwell. Meridian. Date, September 14th. Subject, coverage adjustments. Julian. Regarding the liquidity issue, if I lower the liability threshold on the secondary vehicle, Kennedy's car to the state minimum, does that remove the policy from the aggregate reporting list? I need to make sure the bank doesn't see a premium flag this month. The timing is critical. I can restore the coverage in November once the audit clears. From J. Vane to M. Stewart. Date, September 14th. Subject RE coverage. Adjustments. Marlene. That is a viable strategy to reduce visibility. Minimizing the outflow will keep the account under the radar. It is a calculated risk, but if the vehicle usage is low, the exposure is manageable. The room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Calculated risk, I said softly. Marlene looked up. Her eyes were wet, but not with the performative tears she usually used. These were tears of humiliation. I didn't know, she whispered. Kennedy, look at me. I didn't know you would be driving that night. It was raining. You never drive in the rain. It doesn't matter, I said. It matters to me, she insisted, her voice cracking. I am not a monster. I made a bet. I lost. But I didn't want you hurt. You made a bet with my safety. I said, I was the chip you threw onto the table. That is not love. Mother, that is asset management. Walter placed his hand flat on the table. We are past the point of intent, he said. We are at the point of consequence. Mr. Finch, the fiduciary, spoke up. His voice was dry and professional. A splash of cold water on the emotional fire. Under the terms of the new structure, he said, looking at a spreadsheet, the bank will assume full trusteeship. Ms. Kennedy Stewart will serve as the beneficiary consultant with veto power over discretionary disbursements. He looked at Marlene. You, Mrs. Stewart, will be removed as a signatory. You will receive a fixed monthly stipend, indexed to the cost of living. It is enough for rent, food, and basic expenses. It is not enough for investment schemes, wealth advisors, or private clubs. A stipend, Marlene gasped. I am 55 years old. You are putting me on an allowance. We are putting you on a budget, Walter corrected, which is something you have never had. And the debts, her lawyer asked? The outstanding loans she took against the trust. The trust will settle the principal to avoid litigation, Greta said. But the penalties, the fees from Caldwell Meridian. Those are Marlene's personal responsibility. We are not paying for the advice that nearly killed her daughter. Marlene stared at us. She looked at the papers that would strip her of her power, her status, her identity as the matriarch. Then, she played her last card. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. She turned her body toward me, ignoring the lawyers, ignoring Walter, Kennedy, she said, her voice dropping to a warm, intimate register. The voice she used when she wanted to be my best friend. This is all just legal noise, she said. We can stop this. If you tell Walter to drop the investigation, if you tell them to stop digging into Caldwell Meridian, we can fix this. I can take care of you. I can be the mother you need. We can go to Europe. We can start over, just us. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. I miss you, she whispered. I miss my daughter. I looked at her hand. It was manicured, shaking slightly. I looked at her face. I saw the fear behind the warmth. She wasn't asking for reconciliation because she missed me. She was asking because the investigation into Caldwell Meridian was going to expose her to criminal liability. She was terrified that the Attorney General would find out she had knowingly participated in a fraud scheme. She was still negotiating. I pulled my hand back. I miss having a mother. I said, but I don't miss the transactions. Kennedy? No, I said firmly. I am not going to Europe with you. I am not going to hide the truth to save your reputation. You hired people who hurt me. You forged documents to cover it up. If I stop the investigation, I am helping you do it to someone else. Her face hardened. The warmth evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. You are ungrateful, she spat. After everything I sacrificed. Walter stood up. Sign the papers. Marlene. She signed. She had no choice. Her lawyer whispered in her ear that if she fought this in court, the evidence of the insurance tampering would become public record and she could face jail time. So she picked up the pen and signed away her legacy. When she stood up to leave, the room felt lighter, as if a window had been opened. She gathered her coat. She looked at Walter, then at me. You think you have won, she said, but you will see. Money is the only thing that keeps you safe. Without me handling it, you will see how hard the world really is. You didn't handle it. Marlene, Walter said tiredly, you just spent it. She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The front door opened and closed. She was gone. There was no explosion, no sirens, just the quiet scratch of a pen as Mr. Finch notarized the final signatures. The next few months were a lesson in reconstruction. The trust was restructured. I sat in meetings with Mr. Finch, learning how to read balance sheets, how to evaluate risk, how to be the steward of my own future. It was boring, meticulous work, and I loved it. It was the opposite of the chaos Marlene had lived in. It was stable. Walter made good on his promise. He funded a vocational retraining plan for me. I couldn't go back to high-intensity logistics consulting. The travel was too much for my hip, and the 12-hour days were too much for my healing brain. Instead, I went back to school. I enrolled in a graduate program for forensic accounting. I want to find the discrepancies. I told Walter when I showed him the acceptance letter, I want to be the one who sees the missing numbers. He smiled. It suits you. But the biggest shift came from the outside. 2 weeks after the mediation, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Stewart, this is Agent Miller from the State Attorney General's office. My stomach tightened. Yes, we are moving forward with the case against Caldwell Meridian Strategies. He said, the documents your attorney provided were illuminating. We have uncovered a pattern of predatory advisory practices affecting over 200 clients. He paused. We would like to bring you in as a consultant witness, not just to testify about your mother, but to help us understand the client-side experience. You understand the paperwork. You understand the pressure points. We think you could help us build the narrative for the jury. I held the phone, looking out the window at the garden where Mrs. Gable was helping me plant tulips. It would mean being public, I said. It would mean everyone knows what happened to my family. Yes, Miller admitted. It would. The defense will try to discredit you. They will bring up your accident, your medical history. It won't be easy. I thought about the letter from Caldwell's lawyers, the threats, the bullying. I thought about Marlene, panicked and desperate, being guided by a shark in a suit who told her that her daughter's safety was just a line item to be minimized. I am not afraid of them. I said, Good, Miller said. When can you come in? I hung up the phone and felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was purpose. My accident hadn't just been a random tragedy. It had been a symptom of a sickness, a collision between greed and vulnerability. And now, I had a scalpel. That evening, I found Walter in the living room. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, a book open on his lap. But he wasn't reading. He was staring at the fireplace, where the embers were dying down. Grandpa, I asked, walking in with my cane. He jumped slightly, as if waking from a dream. Oh, hello, Kennedy. He tried to smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. He looked pale, the skin around his eyes papery and translucent. Are you okay? I asked, sitting on the ottoman near him. Just a bit of indigestion, he said, rubbing his chest. And I think I need new glasses. The words are swimming a bit tonight. He closed the book and placed his hand on mine. His skin felt cool, dry. You did good today, he said. With the garden? That was Mrs. Gable, I said. I just watched. You were there. He said, That is what matters. He looked at me, his blue eyes cloudy but filled with a fierce, quiet pride. I am glad we did it, he said. I am glad we fought. Me too. But Kennedy, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, don't let the fight become the only thing. You have to build something on the scorched earth. You have to live. I am living. I said, I am going to school. I am working with the AG. That is work, he said. I mean, live. Find someone who looks at you and doesn't see a plaintiff. Find a hobby that isn't checking brake lines. He squeezed my hand. I am tired. Kennedy, the tank is running a little low. A cold fear gripped me. He had been the engine of this entire war. He had carried the weight of my recovery, the legal battle, the emotional devastation of disowning his daughter. He was 78. I will make you some tea, I said, standing up quickly. Peppermint? It helps with the indigestion. Walter nodded, closing his eyes. That sounds nice. I walked to the kitchen, my cane tapping a rhythmic beat on the floor. I filled the kettle. I waited for the water to boil. As I stood there, watching the steam rise, I realized the truth of what he had said. The war was over. We had won. Marlene was gone. The trust was safe, and the bad guys were being investigated. But victories are not permanent. Time is the only undefeated opponent. I looked back toward the living room. Walter was sleeping in the chair, his chest rising and falling in a shallow, fragile rhythm. I knew, with a sudden, piercing clarity, that he wouldn't be here forever. Maybe not even for long. The stress of saving me had cost him years. I poured the tea. I carried it back to him. I didn't wake him. I just sat next to him, listening to him breathe, memorizing the sound. The accident had taken my mother. It had taken my career. It had taken my body's ability to move without pain. But it had given me this. It had given me the truth. It had given me the chance to know the man who sat in the chair, the quiet, steady hero who had made one move to save my life. I took a sip of the tea. It was hot, bitter, and real. I was ready for whatever came next. The lawsuits, the schoolwork, the grief. I was ready because I wasn't Kennedy the victim anymore. I was Kennedy the trustee. I was the one holding the keys. And this time, I was checking the brakes myself. Thank you for listening to My Mother Abandoned Us After My Car Accident. Grandpa's one move changed everything. This story explored the painful reality of financial betrayal and the strength it takes to rebuild when the people supposed to protect you are the ones causing the harm. I hope Kennedy's journey from victim to advocate resonated with you. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel so you don't miss the next drama. And finally, share your thoughts in English below. Do you think Marlene deserved a second chance? Or did Kennedy make the right choice to cut her off? Let's discuss in the comments.